Hi, this is Jim Cranston from 7 Every Minute and 7everyminute.com, the podcast and website by, for, and about baby boomers. So we're in that magic week right now between Christmas and New Year's. And I always think it's magic because that's when most people kind of take a break from the work grind. I shouldn't say most people, a lot of people do, but they kind of reevaluate their lives and priorities. And we're doing the same thing. And so even though I'm working this week at the day job, still it's kind of a lower level, much lower key than usual. And so even though there's work involved, it's just kind of relaxing to be able to not have quite the hectic pace that often happens in modern day business. But so since we were talking about 2 weeks ago, if you recall, about priorities and goal setting, so tonight we're going to briefly go over one method for setting your goals and for the next year. And so there's a bunch of things involved in that, but it's pretty simple, and so I'm pretty excited about doing it. So we'll let's get started on that. So recall if now we talked about why resolutions a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we talked about why resolutions per se, so for the New Year's resolutions really aren't that particularly useful. Resolutions are just kind of actions that you want to start or stop or whatever, but they have no context around them. So it's just kind of like, oh, I'm going to do thus and such. I'm going to stop eating bread. Well, why are you going to stop eating bread? Well, because I don't want the calories. Or, well, I don't want calories because I want to lose weight. So the real goal is losing weight. It has nothing to do directly with eating bread. And so resolutions aren't a particularly effective way to do that. And that's why most resolutions fall by the wayside pretty quickly. And so a much more effective way to do this is actually define, like I said, to define that the goal that we want to achieve, and then just go ahead and do it and actually reach our goal. So tonight we're going to define one way to define really effective goals. This is just an overview. Some people I know, one of my former mentors, Michael Hyatt, for example, he actually has a multi-day course on just goal setting. And of course, he has a bunch of material that goes along with it, a whole array of products to basically not only do a goal for a year, but goals for the quarters, goal for the week, goal for the day, and everything else. And you can use the same techniques and drill them down. My other mentors, like Pat Flynn, Dr. Shannon Irvine, James Wedmore, they all have very similar goal setting methodologies and techniques. And, so all these successful people are successful in part, I would suggest, because they're very effective in their goal setting and actually reaching their goals. So remember, the quality of your life is highly influenced. We talked about this very briefly. The quality of your life is highly influenced by the quality of the questions you ask. And those questions will help guide us in towards goal setting and making effective goals. But of course, that's a course for a whole other day. We'll get back to that another time. But so insofar as goals, remember that we want to have one big goal for the year. We want to set the big thing. And actually, I think I pulled out my book. Where did it go? It's around here somewhere. There it is, right? The old book, The One Thing. And awesome book. Highly recommend you get it. We'll have a link up on the website for that. And that the whole premise of that book is and it's a real truism, but people kind of try to make believe it isn't, that you can only have one priority at a time. The whole myth of managing multiple priorities, it's funny, that term didn't even exist before the late 70s, early 80s, as I recall. I've looked it up before. There was no such thing as multiple priorities. It's kind of an oxymoron. A priority is the number one thing. You can't have multiple things be the number one thing at the same time. And so the whole point of having one big goal for the year is you want, if you make a goal that really has true importance to you, that is the one thing that you really would feel satisfied if you attained in your year, then that priority doesn't change. You can do other things. You may have little intervening local priorities that are more important, but the overarching goal for your year stays constant. And so if you look at it that way, then what happens is all your other actions tend to support your desire to reach that one goal. And so that's why, and that's the premise of the book, that in any particular situation, there is only one goal. If you're trying to be structured about your life, there is only one goal. And so then all your actions naturally, you don't have to force yourself to it, they naturally flow towards supporting your actions to get to that goal. So the next stage of that, of course, as we mentioned briefly a couple seconds ago, you have the one big goal, but then you have a bunch of other little things that you have to do in between, obviously. It's great to say that I'm going to retire by the end of the year. I'm going to learn how to fly an airplane by March, or whatever your big goal for the year is. But, that's not the only thing going on in your life. And so the next step down below that, that's also very important, are to set a small number. And we'll just use the number 3. That's a very common number. The number 3 goals for the quarter that you want to attain. And again, there's lots of other things happening all the time. There's things that happen on a weekly basis, things that happen on a daily basis. But it's the goal again here for us in this discussion is by the end of the quarter, in 3 months from now, at March 31st, April 1st, if these 3 things happened, you would feel satisfied with how that quarter, the 3-month period progressed. So if you got your car paid off and went to see your uncle in the other side of the country and finally passed an exam in language, just 3 things that are important to you. Doesn't matter if they're important to anybody else, but they're important to you. If those 3 things happened, then you would feel satisfied with that quarter. And hopefully those 3 things are things that support the one big goal for the year. So if you're trying to get in touch with all your relatives and see who they know overseas, and you're trying to learn the language for a trip, and you're trying to save money to pay for that trip, then those 3 goals for the quarter kind of support your one big goal. And it doesn't have to be quite that aligned, but the whole thing works better if you can get all your little pieces and all your big pieces heading in the same direction. It just kind of makes sense. So that's the plan for tonight. And the rest of this is going to be pretty much totally extemporaneous. Made up a handout, and we're going to go through that worksheet. That'll be posted on the website by tomorrow if the internet gods are willing and smiling upon us. And as always, you're welcome to download that. If you notice that it's copyright, but it's absolutely free for you to use, and we encourage you to use it and share it with people. So let's see if we can't get this to pick the right screen here. And there we are. And we want to select the screen. And that's the one we want. Yes. And so now there we are. So this is a little checklist that I made up, and hope you can read it. It's a little bit small. And let me actually just blow it up a little bit. Use Foxit Reader. It's a lovely program because it's very easy to drag things around. And there it is, the New Year's goal checklist. And so I'm just going to read it off in case you're having trouble seeing it on your screen or you're working on a phone. This is a simple worksheet to help you set your goals for the coming year. It consists of 3 parts. What characteristics do good goals have? And I typo there. What is the one thing that you want to accomplish in this coming year? And what are the 3 things you can do in the first 3 months to move you towards your goal? So, that pretty much sums it up. So let's go through and take a look. There's a common method, or common methodology, I should say, for setting goals is what's called the SMART system. We've kind of extended it, and you'll see why. But the SMART method is basically takes goals that are very well defined. So it's a lot of people, you hear goals. If you say, well, what do you want to achieve in life? Oh, I want to be happy. I want to quit my job. Oh, I want to retire. And those are fine, but they're kind of nebulous. What is happy? That's a very common one. I want to be happy. Okay, is happy mean what? And so if you can't put into words what you're trying to define, then the big problem is you never know if you got there. And so, if happiness is that I don't have to work more than 30 hours a week, then say that. I would be happy if I didn't have to work more than 30 hours a week. Okay, now when you're going through your daily grind, you look and say, wow, for the past month, I've never worked more than 30 hours a week. I hit my goal. If it's just I want to be happy, kind of, I'm still working, I'm not happy. Well, that wasn't your goal. So having a very specific goal makes a huge difference, because then you know when you hit it. And the other piece is it has to be measurable. And that's why I said I don't want to work less. I want to work 30 hours a week. What does less mean? If I work 39 and a half hours a week, does that make me happy? No, I only want to work 3/4 of the week. So I only want to work 30 hours or 3 days a week. Or I want to be speaking Spanish at a B1 level in 3 months, or whatever the goal is. You want to make it measurable. And if it's something to do with money, it's not just I want to make a lot of money. I want to be able to deposit $100 extra dollars in my bank account every week, so at the end of the year I'll have vacation money. Whatever your goal is, make sure it's measurable. That's the M of SMART. And it has to be achievable. You can't say, oh, I want to run a 3-minute mile. Well, no one's run a 3-minute mile, and you haven't run in 45 years. Chances of you running a 3-minute mile are unlikely. I want to flap my arms to fly. Awesome goal, probably not achievable. So the goal has to be realistic, but it doesn't mean that it can't be challenging. So the goal, the R, depending on who you want to look at and how you want to analyze it, define it. It can either be a reach goal or a stretch goal or a challenging goal, which is really very useful because our mind naturally, remember we talked about this, our mind wants to keep us safe. And so if we say, well, let's take money because it's easy and tangible. I want to save $100 a week. And meanwhile, your mind's going, why don't you say $10 a week? Because we know we can save $10 a week, right? But the angel on the other side is going, you can do $200 a week. And so you have this little argument going on. And that's the whole point of a stretch goal or a challenging goal, is there's a piece of you that knows what you can really do if you really put yourself out and really apply yourself. That's what you want to use for a goal. Because if you make the goal too easy, it's not really a goal. If you say, okay, I want to save $5 a week. Well, that, for most of us, $5 a week isn't a tremendous challenge. For some of us it is, but for many of us it's not. If you're one of those who is not a challenge for, then say, well, if I can save $5 a week, can I save $50 a week? That's right, 10 times as big. And maybe you think about it and you say, actually, I could probably save $100 a week. Now it's starting to get really hard because now you have to start making hard decisions like maybe I go out and I only have one beer at the bar instead of two, or I have to make my lunch a couple of days a week instead of buying it. Whatever it is, and put it in whatever context you want. The amount of exercise you do a week, the amount of studying you do a week, how much you want to work a week, whatever the important relevant measure is. You want to make it achievable for sure, but you also want to make it challenging, because then when you reach the goal, one of the big advantages, the hidden advantages of a challenging goal, first of all, it moves you forward faster, getting you closer to your big goal. But the other thing is now you truly feel satisfied. If you're at the end of the year and somebody says, "What did you do this year?" It's kind of like, man, I learned how to speak 2 languages and I started walking every day, walking over a mile every day, because it has to be measurable and tangible. People are kind of like, wow, that's really neat. And they'll think it's exciting because you think it's exciting. That's why you want it to be a challenging goal. And then the very important thing, there has to be a deadline to it, a time measure of some sort. When you're going to have it done. I'm going to have this done by some time. The reason for that is to say, well, I'm going to get $1,000 in the bank. Okay, that's great. You're going to do it before you pass away? Or are you going to do it in the next year? You're going to do it by tomorrow? If you don't have a timetable, the goal kind of becomes irrelevant. Almost anything can be attained if you give yourself long enough. And so, and part of the challenge then, part of the motivation in that is to not only have a goal that has some challenging, difficult limits to make it a little queasy to think about trying to do them. I'm going to speak in front of an audience of 1,000 people. Kind of like, yeah, that's a little tough, but I'm not going to do it for 50 years. Okay, now it's not really a goal. I'm going to speak in front of an audience of 1,000 people, and I'll have it done by March 31st or April Fool's Day, April 1st. Now your brain's looking at this thinking, ooh, we got some real planning to do here. Because that's not only a big goal, it's a big goal that's due not very much in the future. And so it changes your whole mindset. It changes the way your brain and your conscious and your subconscious focus on it and approach it. And it changes the way that we're going to actually visualize it and work towards it. And that's the whole separate course I keep talking about, how we envision our goals and work towards them. So the SMART, the specific, measurable, achievable, and then the reach or relevant and time, That's the real core of the SMART system of setting goals. And this was actually done, I think, in the late 70s. And interesting enough, they used the original author used different words for a couple of these, and he had slightly different goals for his goal when he wrote this. But then the two I added, I and Y, to me, those are kind of important because the I is it has to be important to you. It's great if your significant other or, whomever, your manager or your friend or whoever says, well, this is what you should do. And you go, yeah, I guess I should do that. Well, that's not really the same thing as you coming up with the goal of saying, this is what I have to do for myself. I need to, to keep using weight because that's such an easy one, but it gets tiring. Exercise. I need to, I'm getting stiff in the morning. I need to go walking every day. Having your buddy say, hey, you should go walking every day. It's kind of, yeah, I really should. There's no motivation there. There's no real, there's nothing. It meets none of those. It's specific, yes, but it's not measurable. And it's not terribly specific. Is it achievable? Probably. Is it challenging? Not at all, because you didn't put any sort of measure on it. And by when? You're going to go walking by when? For how long? Again, there's no time component to it. If, however, it's important to you, I need to do this for my own health so that I feel better in the morning when I get up. Now suddenly the goal has meaning to you. And it's going to be easy to say, yeah, I want to go walking at least 2 blocks every single day for the next, no, I can do 4 blocks. I'm going to walk for 4 blocks. Well, I can't do every day because I go to church and that's it. Okay. So you want to make sure it's achievable. I'm going to walk 4 blocks every day, 5 days a week. And I think 4 blocks is probably more than I can do now. So it's going to be a challenge to get there. And I'm going to be doing that by the time spring rolls around at the end of March. We start to get towards spring and winter starting to let up. So now you've because it was important to you, you just defined a very good goal. It's specific, it's measurable, it's achievable, but it's still challenging and it's relevant to your life. There's a deadline for it and it's important to you. And the last one, the why, is kind of related to the first one, that you define them. Because when you define them, then you'll find a way. You know what your limits are and you know what you can do. And you know that, and deep in your heart, you also know how you can push yourself. And so if you define them, then that's really good. If your doctor says, you should walk a block a day, it'll be good for you. And you're thinking, yeah, my doctor said a block a day, that's good for me. However, your inner heart's going, a block a day? You walk a block a day when you go down to get the paper in the morning. Why don't we try walking a mile a day? Right? You know what's pushing yourself. And any goal that's worthwhile, worth working towards, then that's going to be a challenging goal. So some examples down below. Let me make those even bigger, did them in a smaller font so they'd fit. I'll run at least 6 miles each week by April 1st. An action, measurement, specific, deadline. I shall call my family each week by April 1st. I'll take weekly Spanish lessons 2 times a week I'll save $100, save and invest. It's okay to have relevant things in the same goal. You don't want dissociated things in the same goal, because then what are you measuring? But I will save and invest $100 each week until April 1st. I'll have started a video podcast by April 1st. All of these have a very specific thing you're trying to attain. They have a specific measure. They have an action that's associated with them, and they have a timetable. And all of them are stretch goals for most of us. So, and then some quick notes here that, goals can change if they're no longer relevant or important. If it's kind of like, I'm saving to get a new car, and your wealthy uncle comes into town and says, hey, I have an extra car. You want it? It's kind of like, well, I don't need to save for a new car now. So you change that goal. The goal may be, and now I'm saving for something else, or maybe rather than I'm saving, I'm investing, or whatever it is. Goals can change when your life changes. Life changes, and so your goals change along with them. That's not an excuse to keep changing your goals, right? So it's not kind of like, I was going to walk 4 blocks, now I'm going to walk 3 blocks. Why did it change? What changed in your life to cause that? But if it's really a shift in your whole life, um, suddenly you get married or unmarried, kind of like, wow, a lot of things just changed. And so all your priorities and goals probably have to change along with them. Hopefully your one goal for the year doesn't change. Hopefully that one is general enough and specific enough that it doesn't have to change. But even that sometimes can have to change. If you reach your goals too easily, right, then again, it gets back to make sure you're challenging yourself. We tend to play it a little easy just because we don't want to fail. And that's understandable and it's not a bad thing. But you really do want to challenge yourself as you're going along. And remember, these tools are to help you, they're not to make you feel bad. Any progress is good progress. So if you say, I'm going to be walking a mile by the end of a mile each morning before breakfast, before the end of March, and you're only walking 3/4 of a mile, but you weren't walking at all yesterday. Kind of like, okay, I guess that stretch goal was a little bit too much of a stretch, but heck, man, I'm walking 3/4 of a mile a day. Remember to reward yourself and celebrate your victories. That's super important. So the other side of this sheet is the same thing, just basically laid out so you can do it in a simple manner. And it's your one goal for the year, right? I will or I shall make, do, begin, finish, and write it out with quite a bit of specificity. You want to say what it is you're going to do. I'm going to um, get up every morning and fill the waste paper basket with trash from the house. If you have seen some areas of my house, you would know what I'm talking about. And probably you've been in that situation at least some point or other where just things have accumulated. And rather than say, I'm going to clean the bedroom, what does that mean? But if you say each week, and I did this for a while, made a huge difference. Each week, this is when I had garbage service, trash pickup. Each week, the trash bin will be full when it goes to the curb. And if it's not full on Sunday, I had Monday pickup. If it's not full on Sunday, I will find things in the house to put in it until it's full. And I got rid of a lot of stuff that way. Things when I looked at the big junk pile of leftovers from projects, to look at it in total is pretty overwhelming. Oh my gracious, how am I going to do all this? I don't feel like paying a dump tipping fee and all this stuff. But if every week you just say, ooh, I have half the trash barrel is free and fill it up, then suddenly it becomes very manageable. And after a couple months, that big pile of leftover parts and pieces is gone. So, just make sure your goal is very, very specific, and it can be steps along the way to a bigger goal by the end. And then, of course, the buy date, very important piece. There has to be a time measure to it, or else it's kind of irrelevant. And especially for the one goal, but really for all the goals, it's kind of, don't forget to really think about it and say, this is important to me. It's not that I'm not doing this for my significant other. I'm not doing it for my friend or whatever. Those are all fine reasons, but it has to be important to yourself. And then finally, this is my own goal. I've thought about this. I've put together all the pieces of it. And so I'm not only am I doing it for me, I'm doing it on my terms. It's not that my doctor said you should. It's not that my friend said I ought to, whatever. It's I've defined my own goal. Because when you do that, then you really embrace it and you really work it through. And then just the latter part of the sheet is, of course, your top 3 goals for the next quarter. And you can add to this, but experience pretty much shows if you're doing big goals and they're really stretch goals, they're really challenge goals, if you get much beyond 2 or 3, they start to get to be pretty difficult to attain. And it's really important, I think, to remember you want to make these significant goals. These aren't little things like, oh, I'm going to get up every day and read at least 5 minutes in the paper. Okay, that's a great thing, but is that really something at the end of the quarter you're going to say, oh, yeah, boy, I read the paper 5 minutes each day. Maybe it is for you, and that's fine, but maybe it's more likely it's something like every day I'm going to sit down and read at least 2 editorials, one that I agree with, one that I don't, because you hate reading the ones that you don't, but it gives you insight into the other side of the argument, and that's always good. So make it something that you're a little bit uncomfortable with, something that kind of pushes you a little bit out of your comfort zone. And that will really get you much better results. And then finally, as always, we have to put the down here, Happy New Year's Days wishes to everybody, and know that your future is a little better by envisioning a nicer life and a happy one as well. And so that's it for the goal setting sheet, and also pretty much for this episode. So let's go back to not that one. There we are. Hi, welcome back. So that's it for the day. Like I said, that worksheet will be posted by tomorrow, and I would encourage you, if you're so inclined, feel free to stop by. I do ask for an email address because I do want to keep in touch with you. But other than that, it's completely free, and download it, take a look through it. If you have any questions, shoot me a note, drop me a note in the comments, whatever. You can contact us directly through the website as well. And let me know what's not clear, and we'll go over it in more depth. So that's it for this week. Thank you very much for stopping by. If you found something interesting and useful, please pass it along. If not, please drop me a comment as what you'd like to hear. Have a great week. Thanks for visiting. Remember to live the life that you dreamed of, because that's the path to true contentment. Love and encouragement to everybody. See you next week in 7 Every Minute, 7everyminute.com, and wishing everybody a fantastic, wonderful, totally outrageous new year. And I digress 1 minute after my close, which is unusual. But I did see in one of the newsletters I'm talking about how 2022 is always going to be bad, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, that's really a shame to start out your year with that attitude. And quite frankly, is 2022 going to have challenges? Of course. Does every year have challenges? Of course. But every year also has the hope, a ton of hope and a ton of good things about it too. People are going on and on about, oh, COVID isn't gone, this and that. Kind of like, remember 2 years ago, we didn't know if the world was going to end from COVID. There was this new disease that had never been seen before. And things may not be perfect, but things are a whole lot better than they were a couple of years ago. So remember, look on the bright side. There's a lot of good going on. Don't forget that. And I hope you have a wonderful new year and you see all the wonderful things life has to offer. Thank you again. Have a great week. See you next week on 7 Every Minute and 7everyminute.com. Thank you. Bye.